الحسنى فادعوه بها وذروا الذين يلحدون في أسمائه سيجزون ما كانوا يعملون.
Okay, so Ar-Rahman and Ar-Raheem. First thing to note about what I find very interesting. Now, I'm not a big fan of the miracles in the Quran, so I think sometimes a bit far-fetched. But this particular figure I find interesting. It is said that if you count the amount of times Rahman is mentioned in the Quran, numbers to 57. And Raheem is mentioned 114 times. Okay, so Rahman is mentioned 57 times, and Raheem is mentioned 114 times. How many surahs are there in the Quran? 114. And 57 is exactly half of 114. And what are the two names? Which name is more intensive in meaning? Some of you might know. Raheem. So he's mentioned twice as much as Rahman. Okay, I mean, there are a number of, a lot of people I know, there's a couple of scholars out there that pay a lot of attention to this, numerical issues in the Quran. But as I said, this is not the sort of primary means of why we study the Quran, or we don't believe that to be the primary miracle of the Quran itself. There are many different types of miracles, but some say it's due to miracles, but anyhow. So Rahman and Ar-Rahim, both names are derived from the word Rahman, which we translate as mercy. And we'll discuss this term of mercy a bit later and what it really means. But let's just look at the difference between the Rahman and the Rahim. There have been various different ways people have translated Rahman and Rahim. And here in the translation they have Rahman, the most beneficent, and Rahim, the most merciful. And just by looking at that translation, you can't really picture the difference between the two, isn't it? And that's the problem with translation. A lot is lost within translation. There are two major opinions as to the difference between Rahman and Rahim. Some scholars say that Rahman is the one who essentially possesses the Rahman. He's the one who possesses it, whereas Rahim is the one who essentially acts upon that Rahman. So we say that Rahman is an attribute which pertains to his essence, his that. Whereas Rahim, what we call sifa fi'liya, it is something which pertains to his actions. So he's the one who possesses mercy and the one who bestows his mercy upon creation. So this is one interpretation. This has a strong basis in the Arabic language, which is Rahman. It follows the pattern fa'lan, and fa'lan is usually used for, is a descriptive pattern which is used to refer to someone who is full of a particular characteristic. For example, how do you say angry in the Arabic language? Anyone know? Ghadban. Okay, someone who is full, like he's eating a lot of food. He is, you can say shab'an, or you can say mal'an. Someone who is thirsty, like full of thirst. You can't full of food, but in the Arabic language, that's how it works. Atshan, someone who's hungry, full of hunger. Jaw'an. Can you see how all the names, they sound very similar? Jaw'an, Atshan, Rahman. So he's the one who's full of mercy, and he possesses that mercy. And Rahim, Fa'il, follows the pattern Fa'il, which pertains to someone who does an action intensively. Okay, so you can have an alim who's a scholar, but someone who's a alim. It's a hyperbole. So this is a person who has intense knowledge, a lot of knowledge. Okay, so that's just the one major difference between the two. The other interpretation is that Allah is Rahman in the sense that His mercy extends to all of creation, but He is Rahim to a select group of individuals from His creation. And this is the interpretation that we will go through, and we will base our explanation based upon this meaning. The proof for that, really, I believe a strong proof for that, we find that whenever Allah mentions being merciful to the believers, He mentions Rahim. Allah mentions Rahim. That He's Rahim bil mu'mineen, that He is merciful to the believers. And it's never mentioned in the Quran that He's Rahman to the believers. When Allah mentions Rahman, He mentions it in the context of all of creation. Ar-Rahman, what comes next? Allama al-Quran. Khalaqal insan. He created man. So Rahman al-Insan. Okay? Rahim, though, it's used in particular, as we said, when it comes to Allah showing mercy to the believers. And Allah also uses that same name, Rahim, to refer to the Prophet ﷺ when he is with the believers. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. He is merciful towards the believers. Now, this quality of being merciful in the first place, some scholars were of the view that this is a metaphor to refer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's generosity. And the reason why they felt obliged to interpret Allah's mercy as being a metaphorical phrase is because to feel merciful to someone usually results from feeling a sense of a painful empathy for somebody. You know, someone says, "Oh, have mercy upon that person," or "I pity that person, I have mercy upon him." What does that usually result from? From you feeling sorry for that person, and from you feeling pitiful, like you become weak, you melt down in front of that person. Have mercy upon him. So many people said you can't apply this to Allah, but this is a wrong interpretation. Really, it's a wrong interpretation. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this quality of rahmah alongside other qualities that indicate generosity. For example, look at the verse in Surah At-Tawbah. يُبَشِّرُهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِّنْهُ وَرِضْوَانٍ وَجَنَّاتٍ لَهُمْ فِيهَا نَعِيمٌ مُقِيمٌ. In Surah At-Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 21. Allah gives them glad tidings, or their Lord gives them glad tidings of mercy from Him, and His happiness, and Jannat, and paradise, which will have Na'imun Muqim, which will have eternal bliss. So that indicates that His Rahmah is not just a quality of Allah where He wants to bestow things upon people. Rahmah is a quality which is an essential quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this mercy doesn't result from Allah being sorry for creation, but because of the fact that He wants to fulfill the needs of creation. Creation has needs. We have needs. And without these needs being fulfilled, we will live incomplete lives and miserable lives. And Allah wants to fulfill these needs of man. Sometimes we are merciful to other people for our own benefit, isn't it? Why? Because if I'm not merciful towards that person, I'll feel bad. Many people, they give charity to satisfy this feeling inside. You ask many people, why do you give charity? Well, it makes me feel better. I feel satisfied. I feel like I've done something for humanity. That's not the way that Allah, He gives to creation. Allah doesn't have those feelings where He wants to satisfy His own needs. Allah is al-Ghani. He has no needs. He's as-Samad, the one who is free from any needs. But He is merciful to creation to fulfill the needs of creation for our benefit and not for His benefit. The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we said it extends all of creation. The fact that Allah, He created man, He sent them prophets and messengers, He sent them scriptures, He sent them ayat, He gave them ayat after ayat, sign upon sign, provisions after provisions, proof after proof, chances after chances. And even in this test itself, I mean, one of the amazing things about life, just compare the test of life compared to the test that we take. If you sit in an exam, you're not allowed to take in with you different types of food, you can't take in with you a bed, you have to sit on a very hard chair. Okay? strict timing. Okay, but Allah has, and what's more important as life, in life as a test, the exam that you sit for 1 or 2 hours with the life itself. But Allah, even though Allah has made life a test, He's given us so many things. وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. Allah has created everything for you upon this earth, all for your benefit, all for your use. Allah has given all of that. Even though this life is meant to be a test, He's still given all of that. Just for you to appreciate the extent of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَرَحْمَتُهُ وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has extended over all things. وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. Another verse, and my mercy has extended over all things. Now, I want you to reflect over these verses in the Quran. Allah mentions in a number of places that He is the most merciful and He is the one who rose over the throne. Ar-Rahman Ar-Raheem istawa. All the verses that mention Allah rising over the throne use the name Ar-Rahman, no other name. Not Al-Ghafur, Al-Arsh istawa, Ar-Rahman. And why is this the case? Reflect over the creation of the Arsh. Now we know that the footstool of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extends to the entire heavens and earth. وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Just the footstool itself extends the entire heavens and earth, the entire universe. And we spoke about last week the difference between the kursi and the Arsh itself. It's like throwing a ring into a desert. So if Allah, who's Ar-Rahman, He is the one who rose over the throne, and His mercy, this is to indicate that just as His Arsh extends over the entire heavens and the earth, His Rahmah also extends over the entire heavens and earth. That's why in many hadith, the hadith Qudsi, وَرَحْمَتِي سَبَقَتْ غَدَبِي. My mercy has preceded my anger. My mercy has preceded my anger. لما قضى الله الخلق كتب في كتابه فهو عنده فوق العرش إن رحمتي غلبت غضبي. When Allah finished creating the creation, He wrote in the book, whilst He was above the throne, indeed my mercy shall overpower my anger. As reported in Sahih al-Bukhari. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, as reported in Sahih Muslim, to Allah belongs 100 portions of mercy. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs 100 portions of mercy. From those 100 portions of mercy, Allah, He sent down 99. So He sent down one portion of mercy to creation. And it's true that one portion of mercy, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the animals show mercy to one another. The animals, they show mercy to one another. A mother is merciful to its child, is merciful to her child, as a result of this one portion of mercy which is shared across creation. It is shared across creation. Allah is the one who placed rahmah in your heart for one another. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Allah, He placed love and mercy in your hearts for one another. So He placed that quality of mercy there. And so, what about the rest of the 99 portions of mercy? Rasulullah said, Allah reserved that mercy for the believers on the Day of Judgment. That itself cannot be fathomed. It's impossible to understand. To think that this mercy, that one portion of mercy exists between animals. Don't forget human beings, between animals as well. It's something which is remarkable that the mind cannot truly fathom and understand. So, this is the extent of the mercy of Allah. And the manifestations of the mercy of Allah are great indeed. And I think, we don't have the time to reflect over the manifestations of His mercy. That's something that you need to do. It's not something for me to tell you, but you just need to look around and you will see the manifestations of Allah's mercy everywhere around you. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Allahu arhamu bi'ibadihi min hadhihi biwaladiha. This is a famous story where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was passing by a group of people, and there was a fire that was there, like a campfire, and there was a woman who was breastfeeding her child. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned around to the Sahaba and they said, do you think this woman will ever throw this child into the fire? And they said, no, Ya Rasulullah, how can a mother throw her child into the fire? And so Rasulullah replied, Lallahu arhamu, subhanallah. Allah is more merciful than this woman is to her own child. Can you imagine that, subhanallah? In one hadith it says that Allah doesn't hesitate to do anything as much as He does when it comes to throwing His servant into the fire. Don't think that it's something easy to throw someone who is beloved to you into the fire, because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even when He places the believer in the fire, He still loves that servant. He's still a servant at the end of the day, someone that He loves, and He's someone who He will eventually take out and place and put into paradise. But it's only for the good of that person, because you can only enter Jannah once you're purified. You can't enter into Jannah in an impure state, and the fire is there to purify you. So even the fire itself is a manifestation of Allah's mercy. It purifies you. It purifies you so that you can enter into Jannah in a pure state. And it's not befitting that you face your Creator and face someone who has bestowed you with so many blessings unless you are in a pure state. Of course, the fire will be painful, but at the end of the day, it's a means of purification for us. Now, the mercy of Allah can even be witnessed in masa'ib, in trials and tribulations, in fitan. Even in that, there lies wisdom and there lies mercy in that. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَبْتَلِي عَبْدَهُ لِيُعَذِّبَهُ. Allah, He doesn't test a person to punish him, وَلَكِنْ لِيَخْتَارِ, but rather to select him and to raise him and to make him from the righteous servants. Now here though, I remember once where I was speaking about the matter of dealing with the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how we're meant to face them. And a sister, I felt that she maybe had experienced this problem herself. I think she was maybe abused by her husband, so she said, how do you expect me to be patient or to be content with what Allah has decided? That's a difficult question to deal with. You're being abused by a husband and someone tells you, have sabr, be content, have shukr. Okay? Someone who's dealt with difficulties like that, how do you deal with that? And this is why, subhanAllah, it's amazing how in Islam, the process that I'm taught us that we can deal with calamities in different ways. And He taught us in particular there are 4 ways we can deal with calamities. The first way is the prohibited way, which is that you show hatred and animosity towards Allah for what He has decreed for you. This is the prohibited way. The bare minimal required way though is by showing self-restraint. By showing self-restraint. What we call in Arabic sabr. Usually translated as patience, but I don't believe that to be an accurate translation. Self-restraint. You restrain yourself from complaining about the decree of Allah. That's a bare minimum, and that is an obligation. That is an obligation. They don't complain about the decision of Allah and show hatred towards His decision. But the level thereafter is a recommended level, which is the level of rida, contentment. Contentment. That is something which is highly encouraged in the religion, but Allah has not made it an obligation out of His mercy. So this is why I told the sister, I said, sister, you need to have sabr, but rida is not wajib upon you. Because imagine we make rida binding upon everyone, to be content with what Allah has decided for you. Do you think human beings will be able to manage that? I mean, this sister, for her to accept and to be content with the fact that her husband was abusing her, subhanAllah. How many women can achieve, how many human beings can reach that level? And the level above that is the level of shukr, gratitude. That's the level of gratitude. And that's the level that Rasulullah reached. When his own son, beloved son, passed away, he was sad, no doubt about it. He had sabr. His eye, he would cry. إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ لَتَدْبَعْ وَإِنَّ الْقَلْبَ لَيَحْزُنُ وَلَا نَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يُرْضِي رَبَّنَا. He would say that the eyes are full of tears, the heart is full of grief, but we do not say anything except which pleases our Lord. This is higher than sabr. He's not just restraining himself. This is more than contentment. This is showing gratitude, subhanAllah. So we don't realize, our minds cannot always understand and realize the wisdom behind what Allah has decided and what Allah has decreed. But we must realize there is khair, there is good in everything that Allah has decreed. There is mercy there. And I think one beautiful, there's this one narration, amazing, subhanAllah. It is said, and this is it is said, now Allah Alam about the authenticity of this, but many scholars have said this and quoted this. It is said that when a person makes dua for another person, like Allah marham, oh Allah have mercy upon him, he's going through so much hardship, oh Allah have mercy upon him. It is said that Allah will say, كَيْفَ أَرْحَمُهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ بِهِ أَرْحَمُهُ. How can I have mercy upon him by removing something which is a manifestation of my mercy in the first place? Okay, do you understand? So he's saying, this person is going through hardship, says, Allah marhamu. Someone says, oh, Allah have mercy upon him. Allah is saying, why are you asking me to remove something which I'm being merciful to him towards? I'm being merciful to him with and by this act of mercy. So the point I'm trying to make is we cannot always understand the decrees of Allah. If sometimes you find it difficult to understand and appreciate, accuse your own understanding, but don't accuse the decision of Allah. I think a beautiful way to understand this as well is a hadith which I want in particular the sisters to memorize. This is a fascinating hadith. It was reported by Tirmidhi and Abu Dawud. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, and this hadith Qudsi, Ana Ar-Rahman, I am the most merciful. Ana Ar-Rahman, I am the most merciful. Khalaqtu Ar-Rahim, and I created the womb. I am Rahman, and I created the womb. وَشَقَقْتُ لَهَا إِسْمًا مِنْ إِسْمِي, and I derived its name from my name. I derived the name of the womb. The womb, how do you say in Arabic? Rahim. Allah, He said this. I am the Rahman, and I created the Rahim, and I derived its name from my name. What the sisters in their wombs is a manifestation of Allah's mercy. Now, sister might think, especially the sisters that maybe experience pregnancy and birth, there's a lot of pain involved in that, no doubt about it. And as we said, if Allah could have wanted, He could have easily had made that woman, conceive and give birth within a matter of seconds. But just imagine if that was the case. Do you think the body could manage developing a child in a small period of time? No, it has to be done gradually. It has to be done gradually. And not only that, imagine you give birth to a child just after a few seconds of conceiving. Would you find any attachment to that child? Unlikely. How does that attachment develop? For a long period of time, for a person suffering a lot of pain, the pains of labor, the pains of contraction, the morning sickness, all of that is the result of that child. And believe me, when you give birth to that child, you don't suffer a lot of pain for no reason. You suffer pain and hardship for a very, very good cause. And so therefore there's a strong level of attachment that results from this womb. Subhanallah. There's another way the and therefore this mercy that exists between the child and the mother is because of that womb. And that womb was created by Allah. So that's the manifestation of Allah's mercy. But also because when that child is in the womb of the mother, who's nurturing and developing this child? The mother isn't. She's not consciously feeding that child as she does after she gives birth. Allah is constantly nourishing and feeding that child in the womb of the mother without any human input whatsoever. You leave a child outside the womb of a mother and see how long it lasts without the care of the mother. So for 9 months, who was taking care of that child? Allah Ar-Rahman. So the womb is a manifestation of the mercy of Allah. And this is why the name of the womb is called Rahim. R-A-H-I-M. Rahim. Now, even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes things away from His servants, this is a means of His manifestation. This is a means by which Allah shows mercy to him. Rasulullah sallallahu said in a hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ إِذَا أَحَبَّ عَبْدَهُ حَمَاهُ دُنْيَا وَطَيِّبَاتِهَا وَشَهَوَاتِهَا كَمَا يَحْمِي أَحَدُكُمْ مَرِيضًا. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the servant, He protects him from the dunya, and He protects him from the good things of the dunya, meaning the luxuries and the comforts of the dunya, and the desires, just as one of you would protect one of your ill patients. Someone who's ill and too close to you and who's ill, you take care of them. Allah takes care of His servant like that. But how? Protecting him from the dunya. So sometimes you won't achieve certain things in life. Sometimes you won't attain the certain things that you want in life. But this is the himayah of Allah. This is the protection of Allah. And so this is the way He shows His mercy towards you. Even the way He commands and prohibits. The commandments are all a manifestation of His mercy. وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا. And listen to this, subhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا, in Surah Al-Imran. And Allah, He warns you. Allah, He warns you about Himself. Allah, He warned you about Himself. How does that ayah end? Wallahu, anyone know? Wallahu ra'ufun bil ibad. But Allah is compassionate to His servants. Ajib, subhanAllah. Listen, this is a threat. وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا. Allah is warning you regards to His own self, but then He says, you would expect Allahu shadidul iqab, Allah is severe. No. Wallahu ra'ufun bil ibad. Allah is compassionate to His servants. So even when Allah warned you about Himself, Allah is warning you about His adhab, Allah is warning you about His punishment. Don't think this is an oppressor that is speaking to His subjects. This is the most merciful speaking to His subjects. So even, subhanAllah, fearing Allah is a type of, is in essence, loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Allah says, and so flee unto Allah. What are you fleeing from? Allah says, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Flee to Allah. What are you fleeing from? You're fleeing from the punishment of Allah. You're fleeing from the punishment of Allah, the anger of Allah, but you're fleeing to Him as well at the same time. There's no relationship like that in this dunya. If you're afraid of someone or something, you want to run far away from that particular person or thing, unlike Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just to quickly conclude, what are the benefits of knowing that Allah is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Raheem? The first benefit, it necessitates that we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It develops our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, and this is very important, this should instill within the believer fear of disobeying Him. Usually people fear disobeying Allah. Why? Because of punishment. But we should fear disobeying Allah because how merciful He was towards us. How merciful He is. And that's why we find it difficult, for example, to be very disobedient to our parents. It's not because, I'm sure when you were young, there were times where your parents would hit you and it would hurt a lot. But then when you grew up, your parents start hitting you and you'll be sitting there laughing. It doesn't really hurt anymore. Okay? But what continues to make you obedient to your parents, because especially when you reach an older age, when you go past your teens, you appreciate so much of what your parents have done for you. And because of that, you find it difficult to disobey them. Because of that, you find it difficult to harm them or to upset them. Also, a person, thirdly, should try and develop the characteristic of being merciful to other human beings as well. This was the characteristics of the prophets, of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And I do not send you except as a mercy to mankind. Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 107. And from the names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that he was Nabiyyur Rahmah. He was a prophet of mercy. Also Rasulullah said, إِنَّمَا يَرْحَمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الرُّحَمَاء. That Allah is merciful to His merciful servants. إِرْحَمْ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يَرْحَمْكَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاءِ. Be merciful to those who are upon earth, and the merciful above the heavens will be merciful towards you. Knowing that Allah is Rahman pushes a person to want to know what Allah loves and hates. If you truly know Allah is merciful to you, you'll be very eager to know what He loves and hates so you can act in accordance to that knowledge. Also, the more you know how Allah is merciful to you, the more you will belittle your ibadah. The more you will belittle your ibadah. You will look down on your ibadah when you understand the extent of the mercy of Allah. So you will never have self-conceit about your worship, nor will you ever have pride. And finally, a person will never lose hope of the mercy of Allah as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا. Say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair from the mercy of Allah. Indeed, Allah, He forgives all sins. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا. So you should never despair from the mercy of Allah, because the mercy of Allah is too great for you to even understand and fathom. And with that, inshallah, we'll conclude today's lesson. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.